Well, hey there, and welcome to Touched by Heaven. We're going to take the week off this week, and instead we're going to go into the archives. And one of the more popular podcast episodes we've had, this from a couple of years ago. Originally, it was episode 132, Medjugorje, the bridge to heaven. We have Angeline, we have David. She's all in on her faith. He, not so much. And it's just great what God does with all of this. So enjoy Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God.
I try to go back to that moment and just remember how really, if she was standing before us, we would be in such awe of her love and her beauty. And I just try and feel back into that.
This is Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide and we see God. We see His hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, big and little God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. This is episode 132, Medjugorje, the bridge to heaven. Back in 1981, Blessed Mother Mary appeared to 6 what are called visionaries. They were young people. She appeared to them, and the message being is that God does exist and the world needs to return to God, return to my son, and that I'm coming to kind of re-educate, reinforce who my son is. And it's time to repent and come to him. Things are going to be happening. And so these 6 visionaries over the years have been receiving what are called 10 secrets. 3 of the 6 visionaries have all 10. The other 3 have 9 of the 10. We know of one of the secrets. That was number 3. It is that there will be a time when on Apparition Hill, where she first appeared, there will be a supernatural permanent sign placed there that will be indestructible. It'll baffle scientists, but the idea is that particular sign will be for the atheists of the world to wake up. God is real, that He does exist. And maybe the world will take note that Mary said something and it came true, just like Fatima. But I was contacted by Angeline in Australia recently. She's been there 4 times and had some interesting things happen. She went because her parents went. They had something really interesting happen. So it's just this ongoing, well, it's 50 million people have been there now. 50 million people seeking, searching, and so many things still going on. Let's get to the story of Angeline. Oh, by the way, I guess I should say this too. It ends with a cliffhanger. It ends with a cliffhanger here on Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God.
Hello, Trevor. How are you?
I'm excellent. I tell you, Australia has just been booming lately for us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I was taken by the fact that you talked about Mary and the Rosary, and I was like, oh, wow, I haven't heard of any such platform ever. What a wonderful blessing that you've made the decision to put that talent to this kind of use. I just think there couldn't be anything more important, really.
Back when Angeline was 18, 19 years old, she had her first love.
It turned out he wasn't so good for me. It felt as though, and someone did say this to me, that he had a spell over me. And the spell was that, I'd hear about him being with other women. And during this time, my parents went to a place called Medjugorje in Bosnia. And the reason my mum was drawn to it is because she'd heard about people that had gone, and she actually heard about this miracle of rosary beads turning, the links turning gold. And one day she went into a prayer, she said a prayer, and she had her rosary beads, and she said, well, Lord, if you want them to change, they will. And then she walked out, and anyway, what ensued was her rosaries went gold, and that was the kind of calling for her and my dad to go to Medjugorje.
It happened before she even went?
The change of the rosaries, yes, before she went. That was kind of a signal for her to go. And then when my mum and dad went, when they came back, every night they would pray a rosary. They would fast on Wednesdays and Fridays. They would just full of joy, peaceful, and it was obvious that they were kind of really testifying to the love of God and Our Lady's call to God and how much, So, and I, being very much away from God at the time, kind of watched on with curiosity, if nothing else. I remember just feeling low, really the lowest of the low. And my mum gave me this picture of Jesus, Christ's face, and the picture was Jesus was, well, he was crying in the picture. So, and it was like swollen nose and bloodshot eyes and looking at me with eyes of love and sort of like imploring and sad and just sadness. That was what I saw. And it sort of struck me. And I said, Mum, why are you giving me a picture of crying Jesus? And Mum just sort of nodded and walked away. And so I found that really kind of touched me. And then the next day when I looked at the picture, it was just like a normal picture of Jesus. And it says, come to me as you are, Jesus, I trust in thee. And he was trying to tell me that he was with me in all that shame and that darkness.
Yeah, and he obviously was very sad by your path. Was that part of that message to you as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The sadness was very like, what are you doing?
Wow.
It shifted something in me internally. And so often when that happens, you don't go out yelling about it. You're quietly observing what's this shift happening, going on inside. And so I think
Yeah.
that was when I started to pray.
That's one of our main focal points here, is that the miraculous wakes you up. That's the whole. It's like takes you by the shoulders and just shakes you and go, wait a minute, and suddenly you realize God's in the room. Jesus is in the room, and it's like then he becomes so real.
Yes, and then Jesus came. He replaced, more than replaced. So the love that I felt for this person, that I felt I couldn't leave. You can trust him with absolutely anything. I mean, who wouldn't want someone like that in your life, where he knows the highest good for you and wants it for you, and if you're with him, he will deliver that to you. And so the knowledge of who Christ is became illuminated to me in such a way that my heart just grew and I just fell in love with Christ. And I was strong. I became strong. I went from being very weak to becoming very strong in Jesus. And I just thought, it changed me forever. But he has just been at the center of my life ever since.
And the boyfriend went away.
The boyfriend, funnily enough, what happened is I ended up praying for him. And, the fact that I could say to him, I forgive you, I love you, but I can't be with you. I'll pray for you. But he actually did. And even to this day, he says that you turned my life around through your prayers. And I did. I prayed actually a Divine Mercy chaplet for him every day at 3 p.m. just so that he would be okay.
Wow.
But that was the end of that.
And then on to what?
So then the first, I was very called to going to Medjugorje. There were about 20 odd other pilgrims. They were all between the ages of sort of 50 and 70 years old. I think I was the only 20-year-old. And when I arrived at Medjugorje, the first thing that came to me is I remember having nail polish on my fingernails and just feeling like I needed to get it off. I felt maybe it was just feeling the holiness of the place is such that it's quite overwhelming. And when I walked into the church on that first day I was there, everyone was praying the rosary. The church was full, and what struck me was the feeling of holiness. And I believe it was just how devout every single person in that church, their hearts were with God. Everyone was on their knees and they were praying very intently, praying the rosary. But it was just like this whoosh. It's like, wow, I felt unworthy to be in there. I felt like I shouldn't, and I couldn't kneel because of the pain I have an injury in my knee, and it's very difficult to kneel, and very hard ground, concrete sort of floor, no seats left. It was full. I tried to kneel and it was very painful, and it wasn't even a conscious prayer, but it was almost like a prayer was put into my mind. It was like a fleeting thought, and it was something along the lines of, take this pain away so that I can kneel before thee, or something along those lines. And immediately as that thought came, my knees began to tingle and then spread around, and it literally felt like I was kneeling on a cloud of softness. And it was so comfortable, and I was perfectly comfortable for the entire time. I prayed all of the rosary, and I knelt in that position all the way through Mass, and it was just,
Wow.
wow, it was just like, it was
Wow.
beautiful.
That's pretty
Yeah,
cool. I mean, the whole thing has to be remarkable.
it was. It was. And I'd heard a lot of stories from other people, miracle stories, this and that. And I've been to Medjugorje now 4 times. That did happen the very first day I went to Medjugorje.
When
Yeah.
you literally kind of come into Medjugorje, and I've never been there to know exactly what's going on. I mean, were you prepared for what it felt like?
Do you know what? I think my parents brought Medjugorje home with them,
Mm.
and the shift that I think my conversion, my shift was happening through them, and then going there obviously brought it all to life. And as I said, I've been there 4 times. I was there first time by myself, second time with my agnostic boyfriend who got lost and found God, third time after we lost our first child, and prayed for another child, and the fourth time that child we prayed for who was born, we went to Assisi and Medjugorje. Last year I took her to Medjugorje and Assisi, and we named her after St. Clare of Assisi, because that's where we prayed for her. And
Gee.
so I want to go. I want to be there. I want to be there now. It's like being at home. It's like Medjugorje is like the bridge between earth and heaven. Um, it's like it's the only place that I know of on earth where you feel like you're as close to heaven as you're going to get. The faith there is very strong, and so people that come, like you go to say adoration at night time, and there's 5,000 people, and there's the most beautiful singing, and the quietness and the stillness is just, you can hear a pin drop, but everyone is adoring Christ. And there's this, it's indescribable. It's just so beautiful. Obviously, you have to enter into the liturgy of Medjugorje, which means you'll pray, you'll be praying 3 rosaries a day. You'll be going to Mass twice a day, maybe. You'll be going, it's a pilgrimage, right? So you obviously need to enter into that. If you went to Medjugorje and just wanted to look around, you'd probably just see lots of, lots of rosary shops and things, and you wouldn't, and a church and some pretty statues. But but if you go there as a pilgrim, it's 100% just the best thing ever.
So since 1981, some 40, 50 million people have gone to Medjugorje because Mary is appearing there, and so many things are going on there. And I've talked to so many of you who have had experiences in Medjugorje, and you're going to hear more on this episode and next week. It is so powerful what God is doing over there. But again, the messenger being Mary. And Mary, through these visionaries and sometimes daily messages of come to my son, repent, that so many Christians are blind right now. And you see it again out there. We've talked about this in recent episodes. Just sleepwalking and blind to the messages. And she said, be careful, be so careful, because Satan wants your heart, and your heart is reflecting Satan, not my son. And again, you're seeing it out there as Christians are following the wrong people, the wrong teachings. And Mary said there are so many good-hearted people, so many wonderfully good-hearted people, but they're being fooled because the battle is over the mind, our hearts, if you will. And so many are going the wrong way and don't know it. So Mary said, I'm here to help you find the path to my son. And it requires prayer. And come to my son. And what he said and what the apostles said, what the Bible says, follow Scripture.
I had a question on my heart or a curiosity, which was, why is Our Lady so intent on bringing everyone back to Jesus? I mean, of course, I knew that, of course, as the Mother of God, she wants to bring people back to God, but it was almost like this desperation of Our Lady, or something that made me curious, and it was just sitting on my heart. Well, not long after we got back from Medjugorje, I went out with some friends, and we're at one of the friends' places, and he had some marijuana, and he offered me some, and I kind of just took it even without thinking too much, even though my life had changed and conversion and etc. I was still straddling the life of a young person. Half an hour afterwards, I started to have an experience. So I was going out to the car with the friends of mine, and sitting in the back seat of this car where this experience started to happen. And long story short, I got to experience what hell is, but I'll explain to you what happened.
And do you believe the marijuana was involved in that, or just a byproduct of it, or that was part of the doorway?
Look, I believe that marijuana does allow the mind to be altered. So, of course, we know that. So
Let me ask you this way then. So they're connected, but do you believe you would have had that experience anyway if you hadn't had the marijuana?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
That's honest. That's honest. Okay.
So what had happened was it was like I was going into this darkness, and the first thing was the death. So think of skeletons, think of burnt out cars, think of darkness, just this sense of absolute no life, no. So it was almost like I was sinking into this very kind of depressive state of there being no love and life, but I wasn't conscious of the fact that there is love and life, but it was almost like my reality became contracted. It contracted into this kind of state of darkness. And
you're experiencing this while you're sitting in the backseat of a car with others, yes?
Yes, but they were kind of chatting and talking, and I was just quiet in the back seat because this is all happening. And it got to the point where I actually couldn't speak. I wasn't able to speak. I couldn't say, "Help me! I'm going through something terrible, please." I couldn't even talk. I was muted. It became this sense of complete isolation and no knowledge of love or relationship. That was all gone. It was just so cold. And then the next thing was I started, I think these demons came, this kind of energetic spirits came around me, and it was like I was on the precipice of hell, it's like they were trying to pull me into this deeper, and I knew what was down there, and I knew there was torture and terror, and they were trying to make me lose my mind. It's almost like with the marijuana maybe altering my mind. They wanted me to absolutely lose my mind, maybe go into and we've heard of people going into psychosis and even committing suicide, and that could be what happens to them. I don't know, but that was what was happening. Something was trying to make me lose my mind, and it was doing it through beating me, like cursing me, saying, I'm beating you, and calling me these names. And the hatred that came through, I didn't think it was possible that such hatred could exist.
Did you sense it coming from a number of beings, or one, or where was this hatred coming from?
2 or 3, kind of. That's what it felt like, and they were bashing my mind. It was like being beaten, but it was spiritually. It wasn't my physical body, and I was absolutely terrified, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't talk, and I'd forgotten God existed at all, and it was like I could see I was going to get pulled into this, and they were going to get me. And then the Our Father came into my mind, and I started to try and pray, but it was like they were holding me down, and I couldn't pray. And so I tried to push the words out, and they were pushing back on me, and I was pushing, but I could see that it was working. And then, almost like the way I see it, it's like a rope came down, and that rope was called faith, and it was my faith became illuminated to me, and all of a sudden I remembered my faith, and that was like a golden rope coming down, and then I could pray with more conviction, and it was like, throwing acid on these demons. The more I prayed, the more stronger I got, because my faith was back. I had it. I was fine. God was there. He was saving me. And so I was then able to pull myself out of the situation, and I knew that I had God with me and I would be okay. The prayer and my faith, it was both. It was both the prayer and my faith. It was just so strong because it was back. I remembered it.
Your story is similar in a sense, with a couple of people who had near-death experiences, Faith being one of them from Australia. She was talking about when she fell into that pit, and she tried to cry out to God, and she just felt her words were altered. She was having a heck of a time trying to call out to God to get her out of there, and her love, and the word love would suddenly become a blaspheme and a curse word. And it was like something else was so controlling her. I think of Howard Storm when he was, very similar. Here's an atheist who was going through a near-death experience. Demons were just pummeling. They did things to him. He won't say what they did. But he felt from his chest, he heard from his chest, pray to God. And he's a guy that didn't believe in God. And he kept hearing, pray to God. And he was like, what's a prayer? It's been so long since pray to God. And so again, but as soon as he figured out how to pray or even say God's name, the demons had to back off. They just couldn't have anything to do with them. It's, and you hear this over and over again, how prayer just drives them away.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And the faith and the belief, because I think when I started praying the Our Father, I was sort of praying it because it was obviously something that I knew, and they didn't like it and they had some power. But as soon as I had my faith back, they had no power anymore. That was it. That was the thing that got me out. And then I just remembered it was almost like Our Lady there with her arms out saying, now do you see why not one of my children should be lost.
Mm. Was she, how would you explain her, I'll call it mood, her sense? Okay, you just went through that. She knows what you just went through. Gladness, a sadness, what is it? What do you call it?
It was it was a sense that you were always okay. I allowed that to happen so you could understand. It was more of that sort of feeling.
Okay. Let's pause right about here. Then more with Angeline here on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. And we'll introduce David, the agnostic, and we'll start getting into his story as well. First, quick Patreon shout out. Thank you so much, Gail, for joining the Patreon family. She's been on the podcast.
Yeah, I blitzed your podcast. Like I listen because I work from home, and I usually work afternoons. So like all I did was listen to that podcast like for 7 to 8 hours a day.
Oh my gosh!
You were able to get through to me and bring me back to God, like where I was drifting away. And you opened new avenues for me to get to him as well, like learning about Mary. And now I read scripture every day. Like I do, like they're very much a major part of my life again. Like for a while, they were on the back burner. But thanks to you guys, and both, like I listened to the shows and I thought this is worth supporting, because even if you can reach one other person, oh my God, you've done a miracle. Like you're doing miracles every day. You're reaching people. You're able to grab hold of me and bring me back in, so I'm sure there's lots of people out there that you've helped and are helping. So it's a worthwhile cause to me.
Well, thank you. I thank you. I just thank you. I thank you for that. I'm going to patreon.com, search for Trapper Jack. But you did, and you did. And I just, I thank you for that support, because you keep it going. So I thank you so much. Now then, Mariana, one of the visionaries who's received all 10 secrets, back in 1982, she had a vision of Satan. Satan appeared to her and said, renounce Mary. If you do, I'll give you a happy life. I'll give you happy love. All will be good for you. Mariana rejects him. He goes away, and Mary suddenly appears and says, sorry, but there is a devil. He too does exist. And in fact, listen up, and in fact, Satan requested from God access, shall we say, greater access to the church for 100 years, for a whole century, and God said yes. That the church would be submitted to trial to a greater extent. God said, you can't have, you can't, I'm not giving you the church, because as we know, the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. We know that from the Bible. But I'll give you special access for 100 years. Can you tell? Can you tell with everything going on? But that the greatest defense that we had against is prayer and fasting, just like it says in the Bible. Mary says prayer and fasting. Okay. She also mentioned something about holy water, which is interesting. She said, you should have holy water with you. Interesting, in the churches right now, there is no holy water because of COVID. So again, during all of this, with the churches closing and some cities just being so ridiculous on not allowing, say, more than 10 people in, and while they can do all these other things, it just tells you Satan is so at work out there right now, secular and, of course, in the church. So, and going back to this 100-year thing, It so ties to something that happened in the late 1800s. Pope Leo XIII, at the end of Mass, he was celebrating Mass, and then he had this vision. Actually, it was more hearing than vision. He wrote it down. He said, I heard Satan requesting from God access to the church for 100 years. Give me the church for 100 years. And God said yes. He heard him say yes, but that he wouldn't give it to him totally, but he would have a special, greater access. But he couldn't have it completely. And again, we're feeling that right now, aren't we? We're feeling it. And that's when Pope Leo wrote the prayers to St. Michael the Archangel to battle against Satan. Once upon a time, it was recited at the end of every Mass. Now, not so much. It's getting a little resurgence right now. Are you glad you had the experience?
Yes, in the sense that it woke me up to probably the biggest thing for me, apart from the fact that I would want not my worst enemy to go through what would befall them if they lost God, is just that the ignorance of us all, that we actually walk with this earth and not realise that we are held in this hug of God every second, and God is so beautiful and so merciful, and He lets us sin, and He lets us, He lets us find our way. But when we die, we will know that He was always there and with us. And so many of those that are in sin are going to realise that God, I always had God. He was always there, and I did all those things. I sinned. I cursed. I did all those things, and it was cursing God. And the profoundness of Him being in our midst in such a beautiful way is going to be what freaks people out when they realise how close God is to us.
And how merciful. How
merciful.
Oh, my gosh. Because you're right. We're going to see every sin in the world. We're going to see every reason why we have no right to spend eternity in heaven. We're going to see it. We're going to see it all. But how our I'm sorry, I'm so sorry makes Him say, okay, let's start over again. It's just wipe clean.
Yeah.
Scarlet turns to snow,
Exactly. And it wasn't that He sends anyone to hell either. I believe what I got out of it, the reflection, was that it's that we lose God. It's that when you say, if you hate God and you don't want God and you lose God, because that's a choice, you don't actually know what you're losing. And it's not that He'll send you there. It's just that losing God means you become prey to evil. You become. It's like when it says in the Bible, what will happen? The disciples say to Jesus, "Well, what will happen to those people?" And He said, "Well, where the corpses lay, the vultures gather." So just like my experience, everything started as a death, like a corpse. That was the start, and was that loneliness. But then it became the vultures came, the demons came. Which brings me to my final experience, which was one of the visionaries of Medjugorje. His name's Ivan. He sees Our Lady since he was a child. He was the second oldest, I believe, 14 or 15 when she first came in 1981. And every day he has had the pleasure of a visitation from the Blessed Mother. And he says he would every day is like the first time seeing Our Lady.
They're all on kind of different schedules, and they all have their 10 secrets and all of this. And I know one of them used to have monthly visits, and now it's once a year. And I know that really saddened her.
Some of them have already the 10 secrets, and the third secret we can know about, and that was Our Lady promised that she would leave a sign on the hill where she first appeared, so Apparition Hill, and that sign will be completely indestructible, and it would be there for eternity, and it would be a miracle.
But the idea is that particular sign will be for the atheists of the world to wake up. God is real, that He does exist. All right. When all 6 visionaries get all 10 secrets, then will come the warnings for the whole world. 3 warnings. Mariana, one of the visionaries, at that point, when she gets word from Mary of the first warning, there's a specified priest she will go to. That priest will tell the world. 3 days later, whatever this event is, he will say, here's what's going to happen, where it's going to happen, what's going to happen, what time it's going to happen, and it will happen. And when it happens, again, the world is going to be given, it's such a special grace to say, hey guys, time's getting tight here. And maybe the world will take note that Mary said something and it came true, just like Fatima. Go back to Fatima and all the prophecies, again, just like Fatima. And she actually said at Medjugorje, I'm here to complete what was started at Fatima. So again, all of it came true. It's going to come true again, but on a much bigger scale. So whatever this first warning is will happen, and then number 2, and then number 3, and the special grace given to the world to wake up, right? Secrets number 9 and 10 are said to be horrible chastisements on the world. But there has to be. We can't get off scot-free. There is just so much sin in the world, so much. There is going to be a chastisement, again, to wake us up, to bring us to God. He is being merciful. It may not look like it, but he's being merciful.
There's a very good book called My Heart Will Triumph, and it's written by Mariana Zoldo. She's the visionary that just stopped seeing her every second of the month. I actually stayed with her because she has a pension. So I actually stayed at her pension with my daughter last year, and she took away my soup plates, and my dinner plates, and she served me breakfast, and she's her whole family are just beautiful. Her and her husband and her 2 daughters were, looking after all the pilgrims. There was a good many of us there. And she's absolutely beautiful. So I was very fortunate to get to stay with her.
This is going to be the last wake-up call, isn't it? Like, here's your last wake-up call, world. Is that your sense?
That's my sense. And the interesting thing is that Mariana and Mickey Musso, who's her interpreter, and he was actually leading our pilgrimage, and others there, they say don't focus too much on the secrets, don't focus too much on miracles. Really, it's about focusing on being close to Jesus, and don't worry, because if you're with Jesus and if you're with the Blessed Mother, she'll be with you. You have nothing to worry about. So they steer people away from any kind of doom and gloom. But, they tell their testimony as it's been given to them and as they've been asked to give. But mainly the message is really about prayer and conversion. At
some point, I know I hear people talking, well, I need candles made out of beeswax because the 3 days of darkness, and I'm going, oh my God. And it's like, that's all great. How about just making sure that you're connected to God today? And if you do that, I don't think you have to sweat the beeswax candles. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know. There are a lot of, it seems that there are a lot of mystics out there at the moment who are, receiving apparitions. And there's I'm interested in hearing, because it does say in the Bible that in those last days, God will give many, prophecy and dreams. And so I'm listening out, but it's a discernment process, right? So Jesus gives us the guidance there. He said, the apostles asked him, how will we know if it's true? And a tree by its fruit. So if it bears fruit, then that's a good indicator and signal. So, and look, Medjugorje is absolutely, the fruits of Medjugorje are plain for millions of pilgrims. It is a place that converts hearts.
So let's get to Ivan, and then we're going to go back to that boyfriend, the agnostic. I'm curious about that guy. Let's talk about Ivan. What happened when you saw him, one of the mystics?
Sure. So I went along. He was coming to do a talk at one of at a church. It was packed full. There was confession, and then there was mass. He was going to have his apparition after mass, and then he's going to talk to us after that.
And this was in Australia, yes?
Correct.
Okay, so he was visiting.
In Australia.
Okay.
Yes, David, my husband came. I think my mum came, and maybe my dad. And we were there together. I'd been to confession. We had mass, and we were all praying the rosary. And Ivan, was kneeling and facing the altar, and I could see him. I was in the back of the congregation, but I could see him, eyeball him, could see he was praying the rosary too. And we were all praying, and I was praying. And then I had an experience, which was that when it was time for the apparition, it was like this realm of heaven descended, and I had this experience. All I can say to you, it was like I don't know if you call this locution, but it was such a strong, hyper feeling and awareness of something going on. It was even stronger than seeing it or hearing it. It was both a feeling and a knowing. She was descending, and around her was this heavenly realm. And I've sensed there were angels as well. And this heavenly realm was, when it descended, I was within it and everyone was within it. And our prayer, so I was praying the rosary, all of a sudden the heaviness that we experience, well, we don't even know we're experiencing heaviness, but our prayers, our thoughts, everything's like, compared to what it feels like in this realm is just full of joy and light, and every thought is magnified beautifully. There's no possible sadness, there's no possible darkness. It is the most beautiful feeling around you. So it's just joy and light. And then Our Lady, I could see her with my heart. She was like a celestial queen coming down with a mother's heart that is just so big, it just covers the whole world. And she had so much love for us. And the first thought that I had, or first prayer, was, oh my God, goodness, I just want to give my whole life to you. It was such an impression that she made. It was like nothing else mattered. I just wanted to go to her. She was just so loving, beautiful, motherly queen. It's very, very hard to describe, but it was a real sense of her love for all of us. And that lightness was all around me. And interestingly, I was looking at Ivan, and when it first happened, the descent came. So it only happened for sort of I don't know whether it was 30 seconds. It was a very short time, but packed full. He was looking down, and I remember thinking, why isn't he looking up? She's here. I had all those senses were coming to me, but he was looking down for a few moments, and then he looked up. And when Ivan gave his talk afterwards, I distinctly remembered him saying, and he says, at first I don't see her, but I feel her. And then when I have that feeling, I then look up and she appears, and that's how it happens. And so that confirmed, that was like a validation for me that I was experiencing that first few moments before she appears to him.
And for you, you mentioned how you kind of saw her through your heart. Can you describe what that means? Are your eyes open, closed? I mean, kind of like
Whether my eyes were open or closed, it wouldn't have mattered. I can't even remember.
I like that. That's good.
Just every time, like in the years that followed, whenever I'm feeling like not close to Our Lady, or trying to pray, I try to go back to that moment and just remember how really, if she was standing before us, we would be in such awe of her love and her beauty. And I just try and feel back into that. And so then, it helps me with my prayer life.
You may know by now by listening to some of the episodes, maybe not, but as I say, I'm Catholic. It's not a Catholic podcast per se. We talk about Catholic things. We talk about Protestant things. I couldn't tell you if more listeners are Catholic or Protestant. I have no idea because I hear from both sides.
Yep.
Understanding that not everybody, as I say, gets the Mary thing. So as they're listening to you going, and they're going, I really don't get the rosary. And we talk about the rosary a lot, and I don't really get the Mary thing. Why don't we just go straight to Jesus? So we bring that up now and then about the whys and wherefores. But in your words...
Well, for me, she does bring me to Jesus, and most of her call is to pray. She's so powerful in that she can bring Jesus to us through her prayers. So she intercedes. It's the power of her intercession and her love. She loved us enough that she said yes to the God, that she would, be the mother, and she knew that there was suffering to come and suffering to endure, and the completely giving over of her son for the world. She loved him a lot, and she loves us. So she wants Jesus' pain and sins to be worth something. She loves her son so much. So if she can bring us to her son, then she wants to do that, not only because she loves us, but she wants it for her son. She wants it for Jesus.
Yeah. Several weeks back, I was preparing for a talk about Mary, and I woke up to words. Sometimes I'll do that. I'll wake up to words. Sometimes it's music. Sometimes it's words. The words were the voice of heaven. And I'm going, the voice of heaven? And it's Mary. Mary's the voice of heaven. Jesus keeps sending her back, whether it's Lourdes or Fatima or Medjugorje. Pick a spot. She is the voice of heaven. She's, now I'm calling her, God's spokeswoman, because she really is. Because you'll notice it's not Jesus appearing in all these places. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why does he keep sending mom? because he wants us to come to him through mom. Why? That's his plan, not my department. That's his plan because he keeps doing it over. He came to us through Mary. We're going to him through Mary. She's one of us. There is no human being ever more elevated than Mary, ever. And she had to be made in a way that was fitting, that God himself could be placed within her. And so you just have to start going back to those things that the church taught 2,000 years ago. You know, what's with this Mary thing? And it's like, no, this has always been. It's just always been.
Well, you present a very beautiful angle. So, and another one which isn't as beautiful as that is just that, we identify with mother as children and father, of course, but to not have that mother, that identification with mother is like, why wouldn't God give us that for his children?
I started hearing a song. Again, songs bubble up seemingly out of nowhere, and we know where that nowhere is. And it was something that was bubbling up a few weeks back, and it's called All I Need by Jack Wagner. And again, it goes back to something about Mary. And this is where it gets difficult for me. I get a little, I don't know what I get. I get, I don't know if it's defensive. I don't know if it's just, I just want to take you and look into your eyes and say, help, please understand this. Please understand. Because okay, you didn't come from Mary. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. You don't get the Mary thing. Maybe this podcast has helped you understand who the mother of Jesus actually is. But again, Mary is his messenger. Again, Mary is, it's like God's spokeswoman. He keeps sending her. If you don't know about Our Lady of Guadalupe and the image and how 9 million pagans were killing their babies, were converted, you need to know that story and the science within that image. You need to know that. Jesus keeps sending his mom to, whether it's Guadalupe or Lourdes or Fatima, he keeps sending her. Yeah, but I'm not a married person. Well, then you're missing the message. This reminds me a bit of, 2,000 years ago when Jesus arrived on the scene and so many went, no, that's not him. Doesn't fit the picture. But it is the plan. And God's, just dropping those breadcrumbs saying, do you see? Do you see? Hasn't she proven the point yet through Guadalupe and Lourdes and Fatima and all these? Don't you see? Don't you see? She's speaking for me. That's the plan. And so when I hear this song again this week, Jack Wagner, All I Need, I look at those words and I realize that's where so many of us are in these words. All I need, it's like we're talking to Mary here. All I need is a little more time to be sure of what I feel. I know I'm hearing these words, Trapper. I know you're saying it, and I get it, but and we got that little fight in us. All I need is a little more time to be sure of what I feel. Is it all in my mind? Because it seems so hard to believe, Mary, that you're all that I need. And Mary says, yeah. Because I'll get you to my son more quickly, more powerfully, more precisely than anything else, than even going to him directly. Jesus again saying, I came to you through her, come to me through my mom. That's the plan. Don't you see the plan? Don't you see it? And that's why the song says, give me just a little more time because I just want to be sure. And we get that. I get that. I get it. Do you want to tell us about the agnostic? You kind of flipped around. You took an agnostic to Medjugorje.
I prayed. Well, yes, I did. Well, he's here with me. Do you want to talk, Dave?
Is David ready to talk?
Yeah, I am. But I met Ange at a pub in Perth in Western Australia. And if you've, to your listeners, if you've listened to a podcast, you get a sense that she's been with God for a long time. Well, I hadn't.
Actually, this might be a good place to pause and then rejoin this next week. And David's incredible doozy of a story, this agnostic who is far from being so now. Well, wait a minute. I promised you a cliffhanger, didn't I? Okay, I promised you a cliffhanger. So here's a little bit of David's story.
And I slipped, and I find myself hanging off a cliff face with just the tips of my fingers hanging into the rock on both hands. And I couldn't feel anything below me with my feet. And I'm outstretched, so I'm a pretty big guy, and there's nothing. I potentially was hanging off the edge of a cliff and that I might disappear into one of these caves and never be found. I've never been so scared in my life.
Wow. If you could just hang there for 1 week, David, we'll be back next week for the rest of this story, and it gets even better. Next week here on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. Thanks, Angeline. We'll get back to just hang in there, David. I need your story. Yeah, I need your story. Get a hold of me at touchedbyheaven.net. And we'd so appreciate your support as well. If these episodes fortify you, help you maybe come to your faith, you can help us out here at episode 132 by clicking through on the Patreon link, or go to patreon.com and just search for Trapper Jack. Thank you so much. Thanks for keeping us a 5-star podcast, too, by your ratings and reviews, okay? So next week, part 2 with David. And thanks again, Angeline, here at Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.